Today, we're jumping into a real historical head-scratcher. King Rehoboam, the son of the famous King Solomon. His legacy is completely split. I mean, depending on which ancient account you read, he's either a pretty decent king or a total disaster. So how can both of those be true?
Right, so this is the central mystery we're unpacking. How does one guy get remembered in two completely opposite ways? Was he a good king, someone who upheld tradition, or was he a weak leader who just let his kingdom fall apart? Well, the wild answer to both of those questions is pretty much yeah, and we're gonna figure out why.
Okay, so our main character is Rehoboam. He takes the throne right after his legendary father, Solomon. And to understand his reign, we're looking at two main sources from the Hebrew Bible, the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles. And this, right here, is where it all gets so interesting.
Look, these two books don't just have, minor disagreements. We're talking about fundamentally opposing views of this king's entire rule. It's like one account gives him a passing grade, and the other paints this picture of an absolute failure. So, which one do we believe?
Now, here's the cool part. The solution isn't about finding an error or proving one book wrong. The key is actually understanding how history gets written in the first place. You see, the authors of Kings and Chronicles were writing at totally different times, for different reasons, and they were asking completely different questions about what makes a good leader. Let's break this down. The author of Kings is writing to a nation that's basically collapsing. So their big concern is idolatry, worshiping other gods. For them, the number one question on any king's report card was, did you let the people stray and worship foreign gods? Simple. But then, centuries later, you have the author of Chronicles. They're writing for a nation that's coming back from exile. They need to rebuild their identity. So for them, the most important question was, did this king support our central place of worship, the temple in Jerusalem? See? Two different checklists for what makes a king good. So if we look at Rehoboam through each of these very different lenses, we can start to see how both verdicts can be true, at least from their own perspective. Let's go ahead and grade him using their unique criteria. So if you're the author of Chronicles, Rehoboam actually looks pretty decent. Why? Because he threw his support behind the temple in Jerusalem. His rival up north, Jeroboam, was setting up his own little worship centers. But Rehoboam kept the focus right where it was supposed to be. So on the Chronicles report card, he gets a pass. But then you flip over to the Book of Kings, and whoa, it is a totally different story. The verdict is incredibly harsh. From their point of view, just supporting the temple wasn't nearly enough, especially when you look at what was actually happening all across the country under his watch. Under Rehoboam's reign, all this stuff the author of Kings was afraid of just started popping up everywhere. We're talking about idol worship on what they called high places, these sacred stones, and something called Asherah poles, symbols of a pagan goddess, on basically every high hill. There were even male shrine prostitutes. For the author of Kings, this was a 5-alarm fire, a spiritual disaster. This was the exact kind of behavior that led to the nation's downfall in the first place. And here's the really crucial point, which scholar John Oswalt just nails with this quote. It's not that Rehoboam himself was out there building these pagan shrines. His failure was a failure of influence. He had the power as king to put a stop to this stuff that his own father, Solomon, had started, but he just didn't. And, of course, a failure of leadership like that has real-world consequences. The story of an Egyptian invasion around this time serves as this perfect, powerful metaphor for the deeper spiritual problem that had taken root during his reign. So this Egyptian pharaoh, a guy named Shishak, comes up and completely plunders Jerusalem. He sacks the very temple Rehoboam was supposed to be protecting. And the irony here is just incredible. I mean, think about it. Solomon kicks off his reign by marrying an Egyptian pharaoh's daughter, and his son's reign is marked by an Egyptian pharaoh coming and taking it all away. And the most symbolic loss of all? A set of magnificent, solid gold shields that Solomon had made for the temple. Shishak takes every single one. So what does Rehoboam do? He replaces them with cheap bronze copies. He kept the form, the symbol of royalty and power, but the actual substance, the real value, it was gone. And this brings up a huge question that, frankly, we still wrestle with today. When do our symbols, our traditions, the outward forms of things, when do they become more important than the actual reality they're supposed to represent? Rehoboam had the bronze shields. He had the appearance of a glorious kingdom, but he'd lost its golden core. You know, this pattern of incomplete leadership, of choosing form over substance, it didn't just stop with Rehoboam. He basically handed down this broken blueprint directly to his son and his successor, Abijah.
The text is just brutally honest about it. It says that Abijah walked in all the sins of his father. This pattern of compromise, of spiritual drift, it was now a family legacy, set in motion and passed down from one generation to the next.
So, what was the root cause of this generational failure? The text points to this powerful Hebrew idea, a heart that was not complete. As you can see, this is all about a divided loyalty. It wasn't that they were, 100% evil, it was that their loyalty was split. They were trying to serve God and something else, like their own ambition. And a divided heart will always, always lead to a divided life. And this is where the story of this one ancient king really expands and becomes a universal principle, one that's about the patterns we all create in our own lives, in our families, and in our societies. See, Rehoboam's choices, and maybe more importantly, his failures to act, they set a pattern in motion. His story is a powerful reminder that our actions and our inactions, they have consequences that ripple out. Whether they're good or bad, they create a kind of momentum, a direction that just gets harder and harder to change over time. And so the story of the king with two different report cards leaves us with this final, really challenging thought. A pattern has been set, the machine is already in motion. The consequences are coming. Unless someone makes a conscious, deliberate choice to change its course. And that invites the question for all of us. What patterns are in motion in our own lives? And what, if anything, are we going to do about them?